Tandy came home to San Jose with her five younger siblings after spending the entire summer with their dad in Richmond, California. School started immediately, and she stepped into the seventh grade feeling completely alone. Her best friend Terry, a year younger, was still at Miller Elementary School enjoying everything familiar, while Tandy was trying to adjust to junior high. New faces, new hallways, and a loneliness she couldn't shake. Her mother had found a job while they were away for the summer, but she couldn't always trust either of her two older daughters to be responsible enough to watch the younger ones. So, every day after school, they were carted to her sister-in-law's house until she got off work, where she would pick them up and take them back home to get ready for school the next day. One afternoon after school, the campus held a dance match, music blasting, kids cheering, the whole gym alive. Tandy stayed to watch and lost track of time. By the time she realized, her bus was gone, which meant she also missed the ride to her aunt's house. So, she caught the later bus home. When she got home, painters were inside finishing the house to get it ready for sale. The smell of fresh paint filled the air. Tired and drained, Tandy went straight to her room and fell into a deep sleep. But when the painters left, they must have forgotten to lock the door. Tandy woke suddenly to hands rubbing her back. It was her sister's boyfriend. He said his hands were cold and he wanted to warm them up. He must have walked right through the unlocked door. Feeling uncomfortable and scared, Tandy got up, put on and fastened her coat, and went to the living room, not realizing she should have walked straight out the front door. He followed her. He started talking while toying with a pair of scissors, telling her about his friend's baby sister, a girl he claimed he had raped and killed in Detroit, Michigan. Then he said, "I'll do the same thing to you if you don't give in." Before she could react, he grabbed her hands, dragged her back to the bedroom, and raped her. When he finished, he placed a single dollar in her hand, told her to go and buy some ice cream, and warned her not to tell anyone because a lot of people would be hurt. Then he left. It was the worst experience Tandy had ever undergone. After he left, she locked the doors and went straight to the bathroom and began wiping away the endless, snot-like substance he left behind, trying desperately to make herself feel clean again. While she was wiping, she heard a knock at the door. Slowly she crept toward the living room window, her heart pounding, terrified that the rapist had returned. When she looked out and saw her Aunt Lula standing there, she jumped, shaken, startled, relieved, yet not able to feel trust of what she was seeing. But it was Lula, the very person she needed in that exact moment. Aunt Lula had returned to pick her up since she'd missed the first pickup. She had already gathered the younger siblings and came back for Tandy. The instant she saw her niece's face, and having watched her jump, she knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. Tandy kept insisting nothing, but her aunt refused to accept it. She pressed gently but firmly until Tandy finally broke and told her the truth. She cried in her aunt's arm, and her aunt immediately called the police. As if on cue, the boyfriend came back. Tandy, shaking and crying but emboldened by her aunt's presence, began screaming at him after her aunt asked him why. Tandy threw the dollar at him, the same dollar he told her to use to buy ice cream. He looked at her as if she had betrayed him by exposing his vile act. Aunt Lula next called Tandy's mother from work, who arrived with a coworker, her face full of shock, heartbreak, and disbelief. The coworker wrapped Tandy in a long, old-fashioned bear hug, the kind that holds you together when your whole world is falling apart. She looked at Tandy and started talking about college of all things. Looking back, Tandy realizes that this woman, who turned out to be a perfect angel in that moment, was trying to pull her mind away from the trauma, even if only for a second. It was the best hug she had ever received, and the words she spoke stayed with her. Eventually, Tandy would go on and go to college. Even in that moment of chaos, that coworker spoke life into her. Police questioned and then arrested the rapist. Tandy's sister later told their mother. He had come to her and said, "I just fucked your sister." At the police station, for reasons she didn't understand, Tandy was separated from her mother and placed alone in an interrogation room. Minutes felt like hours. When the police chief finally entered, He gave an analogy completely inappropriate for a terrified 12-year-old rape victim. He said, "Store owners fake robberies for insurance money. What are you going to gain from fabricating a rape?" Tandy was stunned. She didn't even understand rape or sex, let alone how to invent a story about it. But she stayed with the facts. Every detail. Every truth. Her mother and aunt were terrified that she might be pregnant. Tandy had started her menstruation that summer, but hadn't told her mother when she returned from vacation. When she revealed that she had in fact started, they panicked. Not only had the rapist violated her, he left a lot of his sperm behind, which later helped prosecute him, though not for long enough. Thank God she ended up not being pregnant, as that would have been a catastrophe on top of a catastrophe. At the hospital, Tandy underwent the rape examination. Her clothes were taken for evidence. She was given new ones to wear home. After the long, terrifying ordeal, she finally went home, went to bed, and the next morning she went to school, trying to find normalcy. The house they were living in was being prepped for sale. Her mother called her husband, and from that conversation the decision was made. They were moving back to Richmond. Again. Tandy was exhausted from moving emotionally, physically, spiritually, but she had no choice. When she arrived at her new junior high school, she recognized some faces from the elementary schools before the Fresno move. But 7th grade was different. The rhythm was different. The pressure was immediate. And Tandy, uprooted, traumatized, and tired, had to adjust all over again. This wasn't just a move. This wasn't just a school year. This was the moment childhood ended, and survival began. Cora, meanwhile, believed she was stepping back into love. When she moved back in with her husband, it felt, for a short time, like everything had reset. For maybe 9 months and some days, things seemed good. Familiar. Almost like the marriage had found its way back to what it used to be in the very beginning. But the calm didn't last. Slowly, the same old patterns crept back in. The tension returned. The emotional drain resurfaced. And Cora realized she hadn't stepped back into love. She had stepped back into the same storm she'd already survived. The stepdaughter hadn't moved in with them when they first arrived, and when she finally did, months later, Cora didn't tell her husband she was there. There were 4 doors to enter the house, and one day he happened to come home early, let himself in the side bedroom door, and found her in the kitchen washing dishes. It caused another huge fight because he felt he should automatically know who was in his household. Eventually, Cora left their bedroom and moved upstairs with her children into the larger room. The atmosphere in the house was heavy. You could feel the strain in the silence and in the way she tiptoed around for peace. Cora kept her job in Santa Clara as long as she possibly could, driving back and forth every single day just to hold on to some kind of stability. It was exhausting, the long commute, the tension at home, the weight of trying to keep everything together, but she pushed through it until the stress finally became too heavy to carry. When her body and mind couldn't take it anymore, she filed for unemployment and began searching for work closer to home. Back in Richmond, the paternal grandmother was still living in the house. Cora had never truly liked her mother-in-law. Their personalities didn't mix, and history had already proven they weren't meant to share a roof. But this time around, she tolerated it. Maybe she hoped the grandmother's presence would help keep the peace. Maybe she believed an extra adult in the house would soften the tension. Or maybe she was simply trying to survive the moment without another upheaval. Whatever the reason, Cora endured it quietly, cautiously, and with the same strength she carried through every chapter of her life. One night, Cora came home from playing bingo with a church friend and found the top locks bolted. She couldn't get in through either of the 2 front doors, the one leading upstairs or the one into the living room. She knocked hard, over and over, until Tandy heard her and opened the door. He must have been listening, because as soon as he heard Cora step inside, he sprang out of his bed and started pounding on her as he followed her up the stairs. Even though she wasn't crazy about her mother-in-law, she was the best thing going that night because Cora screamed, "Miss Houston! Miss Houston! Miss Houston!" while he attacked her at the top of the stairs. Grandma Houston came out of her room, got between the two, and yelled at her son to get back down those stairs. He immediately obeyed and scrambled back down. Soon after, Grandma Houston moved to an apartment around the corner. She didn't want to be in the middle of that nonsense. Not long after, Cora packed up her 4 youngest children and moved to Oakland to stay with her brother, his new wife, and their first child, all in their 1-bedroom apartment. She never moved back in with him again. The divorce was already underway. Her brother stayed put in Richmond and went to school from home. Tandy's routine, though, was anything but simple. Some days she stayed in Richmond. Other days she spent the night at her new friend's house directly across the street, a place that quickly became a second home. And then there were the days she made the long trip to Oakland, a journey that required catching 2 buses and riding for what felt like forever. Each option came with its own rhythm, its own sense of belonging. Richmond was familiar. Her friend's house was comforting. Oakland was exhausting but necessary. Tandy moved between all 3 like someone trying to piece together stability in a life that kept shifting beneath her feet. Cora refused to uproot her children's lives one more time. She didn't want them switching schools again, so every morning she drove from Oakland to Richmond to take them to their school, and at that time, 3 of the younger ones were all at the same school. She did it tired, stressed, and alone, because she was done surviving for a man and started surviving for herself and her children. But life had one more blow waiting. Since their return from San Jose, Tandy had gotten beat viciously by her father a few times, but one evening he almost beat her within an inch of her life. Yes, she had done something out of line, but nothing justified the damage he inflicted that night. Her friend Trina across the street had taken over the paper route from Tandy's brother. Somebody had the bright idea to collect his last payment even though they weren't supposed to. Tandy, Trina, and Judy had a ball with the free money. Her brother was furious and told their father. Unfortunately, that was one of the nights Tandy had decided to stay in Richmond instead of going to Oakland. The moment she ran. Angrily, he told her to come here. As he was unlocking the closet to get the belt, Tandy sprang forward and ran out the front door. If she had been thinking more logically, she should have run to her friend's backyard and hopped the fence. She probably would have gotten away. Instead, she ran to her friend's car, where they happened to be sitting inside, and yelled, "Open the door. Open the door." They didn't open it fast enough, and there he was on her. She ran toward the empty field across the street. That's where he caught her. It seemed like the whole neighborhood was out on their bikes watching. He punched her in both eyes as if fighting a man before dragging her back to the house and beating the holy hell out of her. She did everything she could to get him to stop, even saying she hated her mother, something she only said because she was desperate for him to quit. When he finally stopped, she went upstairs, went to bed, and went to school the next day. The whole neighborhood was talking. A girl at her junior high looked at her and said, "Who beat your ass?" She was stunned when Tandy told her it was a beating from her own parent. Her brother went back and told their mother that Tandy had said she hated her. Tandy had to explain to her mother that she only said it to try to get him off of her. The courtroom, the day Cora took her power back. When it was finally time to go to court and settle who would get the house, Cora felt something shift inside her. After almost 5 years of running from Richmond to Fresno, to Pomona, to San Jose and back again, this moment felt final, like the last chapter of a long, painful book. That morning, she looked at Tandy and said, "Put on your dress. You're coming with me." It wasn't a suggestion. It was intention. Cora wanted her daughter beside her, not just for support, but because Tandy carried the truth of everything they had survived. Her face still held the marks of what had been done to her. Her presence alone told a story no lawyer could twist and no judge could ignore. They walked into the courthouse together, mother and daughter, carrying years of fear, years of running, years of trying to protect each other. The waiting, a man unraveling. Inside the courtroom, they sat quietly while the minutes dragged on. Across the room, Cora's husband sat with his lawyer, twitching in his seat, shifting, sweating, looking everywhere except at them. He wasn't nervous about the legal fight. He was terrified of the truth sitting beside Cora. Tandy's bruised face was a mirror he couldn't escape. Her eyes held memories he didn't want exposed. Her presence was evidence he couldn't argue against. The tension in the room grew thick, the kind that makes everyone hold their breath. The breaking point. Fear in real time. Then, before the judge even entered, everything snapped. He shot up out of his chair like the seat had burned him. He leaned into his lawyer, whispering fast and frantic. His lawyer's eyes widened. Moments later, the message crossed the aisle. He says she can have the house in 6 weeks. He didn't want to face the judge. He never faced the judge. Not for 1 second. He couldn't risk the judge seeing Tandy's face. He couldn't risk the truth being spoken out loud. He couldn't risk the consequences of what he had done. Fear made him fold. Fear made him surrender. Fear made him give Cora the house without a fight. Cora didn't argue. She didn't flinch. She simply nodded. She was fine with staying in Oakland for another month and a half. His last attempt at control. After the lawyers finished exchanging information, he walked up to Cora and asked bluntly, "Why did you bring her to court looking like that?" But Cora didn't answer. She didn't need to. Looking back, Tandy knew her mother understood exactly what she was doing, bringing her to court with 2 black eyes and telling her to put on her skirt. Her mother wasn't being cruel. She was being strategic. She was protecting her children the only way she could. Her presence was the truth he couldn't outrun. The victory. Cora's silent triumph. After nearly 5 years of chaos, Cora finally had the house. Not only did she get it, his name came off the deed. The same deed he had once tried to trick her into signing away in San Jose, when the notary asked her 3 times if she knew what she was doing. Thank God she hadn't mailed it. Now, she didn't have to run anymore. She didn't have to pack up children in the middle of the night. She didn't have to board buses across California. She didn't have to survive in borrowed rooms or crowded houses. She walked out of that courthouse with her daughter beside her, her home secured, her future reclaimed. It wasn't the judge who gave her the house. It wasn't the lawyers. It wasn't the system. It was the truth. It was her strength. It was the courage of her child, standing beside her like a living testimony. That day wasn't just a legal victory. It was the day Cora took her power back. Life without Dave again was supposed to feel lighter, but it didn't happen overnight, though it was a lot less stressful. The house was finally hers, the deed finally clean, his name finally gone, but the emotional residue didn't disappear just because the paperwork did. After years of running back and forth, fighting, surviving, and protecting her children, Cora had to learn how to breathe again. Oakland wasn't easy, but it was necessary. 6 more weeks and it would be over. The 1-bedroom apartment was cramped, loud, and full of life. Her brother, his new wife, their baby, and now Cora with 4 and sometimes 5 children of her own. But it was safe. Safe mattered more than space. Her brother was a literal lifesaver all the way around, but she was sure he and his wife were glad to have their home back to themselves when they left 6 weeks later. Now, when Cora woke up in the morning before the sun, she just fixed breakfast, made sure they were ready, and 4 of the 5 youngest walked to school together each morning. She and they were relieved to be done with the long, arduous trips back and forth to Richmond just to attend school. That stress disappeared, but the stress of being a single mother of some very hard-headed, moving into adulthood children brought its own challenges. Her ex-husband hardly ever came around to help with the children, though he stayed close to his oldest son and gave him work in his construction business. When he wasn't working or hanging out at the local bar, he'd sometimes accept phone calls from the younger ones and provide as little as he possibly could. He was not helpful in raising his kids, and at that point he literally hated Tandy. Maybe he felt she had something to do with him losing the house, a house he'd come to love, where he used to throw night parties for his birthday, his brother's birthday, and whatever other occasion he could think of to throw the happy celebration. He'd buy cartons of cigarettes and enough alcohol to run his own bar, and it was always free, so of course it was always packed. He had even built a bar inside the house. Cora did it alone, because she refused to let instability become her children's normal. And slowly, life without Dave became life with peace. Not perfect peace, but peace compared to what came before. The yelling stopped. The fear stopped. The tiptoeing stopped. The waiting for the next explosion was all gone. The year he failed them completely. When it came time to provide school clothes for 6 of the still dependent children, he was no help at all. Not one shirt. Not one pair of pants. Not one shoe. No matter how much they begged, no matter how many times Cora reminded him of his responsibility, he simply did not come through. And this wasn't just a one-time failure, it was every beginning of the school year. Every August brought the same stress, the same fear, the same question hanging over Cora's head. Would her children be forced to walk into school wearing last year's rags, or would he finally gain a conscience? He seldom ever did. Cora wasn't working outside the home during those years. She was completely vulnerable, doing everything she could to provide the basics: food, shelter, safety, but school clothes were a different battle. She didn't have the income, and he didn't have the heart. It was a fragile time for the family. The children needed stability more than ever. And Cora was holding the entire household together with nothing but grit and prayer. Watching her children prepare for school with worn-out clothes and shoes that had long lost their shape broke something inside her. She had carried them through cities, hotels, borrowed rooms, and long nights sleeping in the car. She had fed them, protected them, and shielded them from storms they never asked for. And still, even with the marriage behind them and no obligations left except fatherhood, he offered nothing. It was a painful reminder of how alone she had been all along. But it was also the moment she understood deeply, clearly, that she could no longer expect anything from him. Not help. Not support. Not partnership. Not even the bare minimum for his own children. That realization became part of her strength. It pushed her to fight harder. It pushed her to build a life where her children would never again have to beg for what they needed. That year didn't break her. It clarified her. It prepared her for the victory that was coming. When her brother stepped in, and the reality of her older children. Because her husband refused to help with school clothes that year, Cora was left with 6 children who needed everything and no money to get it. That's when her brother, Uncle Stennis, and his wife stepped in. They loaned her $75 to help toward the school clothes purchases. It wasn't much, not for 6 growing children, and it didn't stretch very far. But Cora made every dollar work. She bought what she could, piecing together outfits, finding deals, and doing her best to make sure her children didn't walk into school feeling forgotten. The 2 her children weren't as financially dependent on her by then. Her oldest was working at Jack in the Box, and her second oldest was now pregnant, a pregnancy that came from a boyfriend who was a now verified rapist. It was a heavy, heartbreaking reality Cora carried quietly. Another weight added to a year already filled with struggle. So that $75 wasn't just money. It was love. It was support. It was someone finally showing up for her when the one who should have didn't. And in a year when she felt completely alone, that small act of help meant everything. The house in Richmond became a symbol, not of what she escaped, but of what she reclaimed. A place where she didn't have to brace herself. A place where she didn't have to scream for Ms. Houston to come save her. And a place where she didn't have to hide bruises or explain why she was crying. But even with Dave gone, the aftermath lingered. Tandy was still healing from her own trauma: the rape, the interrogation, the move, the beating, the constant uprooting. She was trying to find her footing in a world that had already shown her its darkest corners. And Cora, now free from her husband, had to learn how to mother through the damage he left behind. Life without Dave meant rebuilding. It meant figuring out how to stretch money to feed 9 people. It meant learning how to be both soft and strong at the same time. It meant teaching her children that safety wasn't a luxury, it was a right. It meant showing them that leaving wasn't weakness, it was survival. And it meant facing the truth that she had stayed too long, but she had finally left. The neighborhood noticed the change. The kids noticed the change. She was just glad to be free of him for good, and she never looked back. Life without Dave again wasn't easy. But it was better. It was quieter. It was safer. It was hers. And for the first time in years, Cora could finally exhale. One good thing about always coming back to Richmond was reconnecting with Tandy's best friend, Spring. Even though Spring and her family no longer lived across the street, they stayed in touch. They always had the same phone number, and so finding each other again was effortless. When Tandy first returned, Both girls were attending Downer Junior High School, right up until the district discovered Tandy no longer lived across the street and forced her to switch schools. But that never stopped their friendship. Sometimes Tandy would ride the bus past her school bus stop just to go see Spring and her sister Jude. Jude had also been sexually violated and was expecting her first child. The situation was scandalous, but the baby was a blessing and loved by everyone. Tandy admired Jude deeply. She knew that if she had gotten pregnant from her own assault, she wouldn't have survived it emotionally. Not in this world. She thanked God every day that she missed that bullet. Going to Spring and Jude's house was always a treat. The entire family had a natural sense of humor. Instead of being in class like they should have been, they'd spend the whole day laughing, talking, and escaping the heaviness of their real lives. And they always had good food to eat. Spring's home became Tandy's refuge, her safe place, her laughter, her breath of fresh air. It was a house where humor lived, where joy wasn't forced, and where the weight she carried could lift for a few hours at a time. And in those moments, laughing in Spring's living room, skipping class, sharing stories, finding joy in small things, Tandy began to rebuild herself. Not all at once. Not perfectly. But piece by piece. Cora was A-okay with Tandy hanging out at Spring's house. She had known Spring's family since the early days on 11th Street, back when they first moved into that neighborhood over 6 years earlier. Spring's mother, her sisters and brothers, the whole household, they were familiar, steady, and safe. Cora had seen Spring's mom raise her own children as a single parent with warmth, humor, and determination. She trusted the environment completely. After everything Tandy had been through, Cora felt relief knowing her daughter had a place where laughter lived, where the energy was light, and where she didn't have to worry about danger lurking behind a door. Spring's home wasn't just a friend's house, it was one of the few places Cora knew her daughter could breathe. Family turning point. The shift that changed everything. The turning point for the family didn't arrive with noise. It didn't come with a big announcement or a dramatic moment. It came quietly, the same way trauma had crept in, but this time it was healing that slipped through the cracks. For years, the family had lived in reaction mode. Running, surviving, escaping, recovering. But once Cora reclaimed the house and Dave was finally out of their lives on a daily basis, the family began to experience something they hadn't felt in a long time. Stability. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't smooth. But it was real. And stability changed everything. The children began to settle. The younger kids, who had spent years bouncing between cities, schools, and emotional climates, finally had one place to call home. They walked to school together every morning, 4 of them in a row, something simple, but something they hadn't consistently had in a while. They weren't waking up to yelling. They weren't bracing for chaos. They weren't watching their mother shrink under someone else's anger. They were watching her rise. And children notice when a mother rises. They noticed she smiled more. They noticed she slept better. They noticed she wasn't afraid of the front door anymore. They noticed she didn't whisper when she talked. They noticed she didn't tiptoe through her own house. She lived freely in her own room, which was downstairs where she once shared with her ex-husband. This was the beginning of their family turning point, the moment when survival slowly shifted into rebuilding. Tandy's shift. From trauma to identity. Tandy had been carrying the heaviest load, the rape, the interrogation, the beating, the instability. But now she had space to breathe. Space to think. Space to feel. This was the turning point where Tandy began to understand. She wasn't broken. She was wounded, and wounds can heal. She wasn't alone. She had people who loved her. She wasn't defined by what happened. She was defined by what she survived. Piece by piece, she began to reclaim herself. This was her identity shift, the moment she stopped being the girl everything happened to and started becoming the girl who kept going. Cora's shift from survivor to leader. Cora's turning point came the day she realized she wasn't afraid of her own house anymore. She walked through the rooms differently. She cooked differently. She talked differently. She parented differently. She existed differently. She wasn't shrinking. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't bracing. She wasn't apologizing for breathing. She was leading. She was the head of her household, not by force, but by presence. By consistency. By love. By strength. And the kids felt it. They listened, respected, and trusted her more. They leaned on her more. They saw her as the anchor she had always been, but now without the storm pulling her under. This was the moment Cora shifted from survivor to matriarch, the woman who held the family together not because she had to, but because she finally could. The family turning point, what it really meant. The turning point wasn't one moment. It was a series of small ones. The morning the kids walked to school without fear. The afternoons Tandy laughed at Spring's house. The night Cora slept without checking the locks twice. The day Dave's name came off the deed. The moment Cora realized she didn't have to run anymore. The moment Tandy realized she wasn't alone. The moment the family realized they were finally safe. Safety changed them. Stability changed them. Peace changed them. This was the turning point where the family stopped living in reaction to trauma and started living in pursuit of a future. A future they could build. A future they could shape. A future they could finally believe in. Cora's spiritual root, the faith that held her family together. Cora didn't have much control over the chaos life threw at her, but she controlled what her children were taught. And she made sure every single one of them knew God. Church wasn't optional, it was foundation. It was structure. It was the one place where her children could sit still long enough to hear something that might save them later. Her mother had planted faith deep in her, and Cora carried that same seed into her parenting. Even on Sundays when she didn't make it to service, she made sure her children did. She'd get them fed, dressed, lined up, and out the door because she believed that if they knew God early, they'd have something solid to hold on to when life got rough. And life did get rough. But church gave them rhythm and grounding. It reminded them that there was something bigger than the chaos, something steady and loving, unmoved by arguments or instability. Tandy remembered those Sundays clearly. The fun mornings in Bible class, the quiet walk into the sanctuary, the whole church singing praises to God, the worn hymn books, the sunlight pouring through stained glass windows. She didn't always understand the sermons, but she understood the feeling, peace, a peace she didn't always get at home. That peace stayed with her. It became part of her foundation. Later, when life hit her with things no child should ever face, she realized her mother hadn't just taken her to church. She had given her a lifeline. Cora wanted her children to know that God was protection and guidance, the voice they could call on when she wasn't there, the anchor they could hold when the world felt too heavy. And even when the family moved from city to city, house to house, crisis to crisis, she kept one thread consistent. Her children would know God. Faith didn't erase the trauma, but it gave them a place to return to spiritually, emotionally, mentally, when everything else was falling apart. Cora's relationship with God wasn't something she discovered later in life. It was inherited. Her mother planted faith in her early, deep enough that even when life pulled her in every direction, that root never came loose. It was quiet, personal, and woven into the way she lived, steady through marriage, moves, fear, responsibility, and survival. Her faith didn't shout. It held. Faith through the storm, how God held her together. When the marriage crumbled, when the yelling started, when fear crept in, when bruises appeared, when the moves became constant, when the children were hurting, Cora leaned on God harder than ever. She prayed quietly and consistently in the kitchen, in the car, in the bathroom, in the silence of her room. She prayed for strength, protection, guidance, her children's future, and a way out. Every time she felt she couldn't take another step, faith carried her one more. Her spiritual journey wasn't about perfection or being the ideal churchwoman. It was about survival. It was about endurance. It was about believing that God would not let her drown. And he didn't. Faith after freedom, who she became. Once she left Dave for good, Cora's faith didn't fade, it deepened. She prayed with gratitude, clarity, and relief. She prayed with the strength of a woman who had survived the storm and was finally standing in her own sunlight. Her spiritual life became less about holding on. She taught her children that God wasn't just the one who got them through the hard times. He was the one who blessed them with the good ones. As the house in Richmond became peaceful again, Cora's faith became the quiet heartbeat of the home, steady, present, and hers. The family and the church, a history of faith, community, and survival. Church wasn't just a place they went on Sundays. It became a village, a classroom, a refuge, and a mirror that showed them who they were becoming. Wherever they moved, church stayed consistent. It gave them structure, community, belonging, a break from chaos. The mothers of the church, the strict sisters, the brothers, the Bible class teachers, the elders, they were the village. They taught the children how to pray, testify, respect elders, sit still, carry themselves, listen, and believe. Those lessons stayed with them long after they moved away. After the divorce, faith is healing. Once Dave was gone and the house became peaceful again, church took on new meaning. It became healing. The children walked to church with less fear. Cora prayed with more clarity. Tandy listened with more understanding. The younger siblings felt more connected. The family felt more whole. Faith wasn't just inherited, it became lived. Over the years, what church really gave them? Looking back, the family realized church had given them far more than Sunday mornings. It gave them a moral compass, identity, community, a place to breathe, a place to grow, a place to be seen, safety. Church didn't erase trauma or stop storms, but it gave them a foundation strong enough to survive it all. Years later, when Tandy faced the darkest moments of her life, she realized something. Her mother hadn't just taken her to church. She had given her a lifeline. Cora's new chapter, walking into her own future. After a couple of years of settling back into her home, and with her youngest finally in elementary school alongside his siblings, Cora decided it was time to do something she had never truly done before. Something for herself. For so long, her life had been about running, protecting, surviving, and keeping her children afloat. But now, with the house reclaimed, the chaos gone, and a little bit of breathing room in her days, she felt a spark she hadn't felt in years. She wanted to grow. She wanted to learn. She wanted to build something that belonged to her. So, she enrolled at Contra Costa College in the Culinary Arts program. Every morning, after waking the children, fixing breakfast, checking backpacks, and sending them off to school, she would lace up her shoes and walk, literally walk, all the way to the college campus. It wasn't a short walk. It wasn't an easy walk. But it was her walk. A walk toward independence. A walk toward identity. A walk toward joy. Discovering joy in what she'd done all her life. Cora had been cooking her whole life, feeding 9 people on a tight budget, stretching meals, making something out of nothing. But culinary school gave her something she had never had before. Technique. Creativity. Confidence. Pride. She found joy in learning the why behind the recipes she'd been making for decades. She learned new dishes, new flavors, new methods, and she soaked it all in like a sponge. And every afternoon, she would rush home, excited like a kid with a new toy, ready to try out whatever she had learned that day. She'd pull out pots and pans, gather ingredients, and recreate the recipes with precision, chopping the way her instructor taught her, seasoning the way she'd seen in class, plating the food beautifully even though she was feeding a house full of children. Her kitchen became her classroom. Her home became her test kitchen. Her children became her taste testers. And they loved it. What this chapter really meant. This wasn't just about cooking. This wasn't just about school. This wasn't just about recipes. This was about Cora reclaiming herself. After years of being defined by trauma, marriage, motherhood, and survival, she finally stepped into something that belonged solely to her, something that made her feel alive, capable, and proud. Cora wasn't just learning how to cook. She was learning how to dream again. And every step she took toward Contra Costa College was a step away from the woman she used to be and a step toward the woman she was becoming. Cora's holiday hustle, the year she became the cake lady. That Thanksgiving was different. Cora had literally mastered making German chocolate cake, not just good, but mastered. The kind of cake that made her smile while she stirred, the kind that made her hum while she frosted, the kind that made her feel proud of herself in a way she hadn't felt in years. By Christmas, she was so excited about her new skill that she bought a stack of cute pink cake boxes and turned her kitchen into a holiday bakery. She sold cakes to neighbors, friends, and anyone who wanted something sweet for the season. It was. Tandy, who had gone from a size 12 down to a size 7, didn't stand a chance against that cake. She'd come home and feast on Cora's homemade breads, the kind that tasted better than anything sold in the stores, and especially that German chocolate cake. It put some of those pounds right back on her frame, and she literally could not help it. But biology class changed her life in one unexpected way. After a spin through the chapter on animal anatomy, she learned that hog head cheese and the chitlins were made with pork, and that the chitlins she'd been eating a good portion of her life were exactly what the teacher said they were: pig guts. Tandy was too through. She never stacked them on her plate again. She was done. She never came in contact with any chitlins again. And she definitely stayed far away from the hog head cheese. It became one of those family stories, the day biology class snatched Tandy's appetite and set her food boundaries for life. One afternoon, feeling generous, she cut a thick slice and carried it down to the neighborhood store lady, the one owned by Miss Martha, the lady who used to ask 1,000 questions before she'd hand over the candy. Tandy handed her the slice proudly. Miss Martha tasted the slice Tandy brought her, and as best as she could, she cut it into small pieces so everyone in her family could get a taste. She laughed and said all her boys complained that it was too sweet. But they ate it anyway. And in return, Miss Martha shared some of the foods she was proud to have made. She had her own specialties, dishes she made with the same kind of joy Cora had when she baked. She'd offer them to Tandy, Trina, and Judy, happy to see young girls enjoying something she created. Miss Martha was also the grandmother of Trina's new baby boy, and she took pride in that connection. One day she showed them how she made her homemade ice cream rich, cold, and smooth, the kind that tasted like summer and tradition all at once. It was her way of giving back, of showing love, of saying you're welcome here, without needing many words. When Christmas rolled around, Tandy bought one from her mother and took the full cake, boxed neatly in one of those pink holiday boxes, and delivered it to Miss Martha. Later, Mrs. Winstall laughed and said her boys did the same thing again. Each one grabbed a big slice, poured a full glass of milk, and within an hour the entire cake was gone. They complained. They devoured. They didn't leave a crumb. And that was the year Cora became known quietly, unofficially, as the Cake Lady. The woman who could turn a holiday into something sweet, something warm, something memorable. The woman whose German chocolate cake could silence a house full of boys who claimed it was too sweet while licking the plate clean. It was more than baking. It was joy. It was confidence. It was Cora rediscovering herself, one cake at a time. Cora's discoveries, the year her kitchen became legend. Cora didn't just learn recipes at Contra Costa College. She discovered a whole new world of cooking that lit her up from the inside. Every week she came home with something new, something exciting, something she couldn't wait to try out on her family. And when Cora discovered something, the whole neighborhood found out. Her new dishes became instant classics. Hog head cheese that she seasoned just right. Sweet and sour chicken or pork, depending on the day. Shrimp crab salad that disappeared the moment she set it down. Cornbread with the perfect crunchy corners, the kind that never lasted more than 10 minutes. Greens that were out of this world. Lord, her greens were to die for. Slow cooked, seasoned deep, rich, and soulful, the kind of greens that made people close their eyes when they took the first bite. Every time she cooked, the house turned into a gathering place. Kids, neighbors, cousins, everybody seemed to show up right when the food came out. And nobody ever left hungry. But Cora's favorite time to cook wasn't the holidays or special occasions. It was Sunday dinner. That was her stage. Her joy. Her ministry. Her love language. She'd start early, moving around the kitchen with purpose, pots simmering, pans sizzling, the oven warming the whole house. The children would wake up to the smell of something delicious drifting through the air, and so would the neighbors. By noon, the entire block smelled like Cora's kitchen. People walking by would slow down. Windows would crack open. Kids would ask, "What's Miss Cora cooking today?" And grown folks would joke that they wished they lived at her house. Sunday dinner wasn't just a meal, it was an event. A tradition. A weekly celebration of survival, family, and flavor. Her hog head cheese was devoured. Her sweet and sour chicken vanished. Her shrimp and crab salad never made it to the next day. Her cornbread disappeared before it cooled. Cora cooked like she loved, fully, loudly, generously, and with her whole heart. And in those years, her kitchen became legendary. A place where the family gathered. A place where joy lived. A place where Cora finally felt like she was doing something for herself and giving something beautiful to everyone around her. Cora didn't just cook meals. She created experiences. Her dishes weren't just food, they were comfort and celebration. They were proof of how far she had come. They were the joy she poured into her family. Every time she cooked, she wasn't just feeding. She was feeding memories. Cora's green car victory, the walk that paid off. While Cora was attending culinary school, she stumbled across something she had never truly had access to before, a free grant. And instead of spending it, she saved it. Every penny, every dollar, every bit of it. Saving became her new discipline, something she learned to do with pride. After years of stretching meals, stretching paychecks, stretching her patience, she finally had something she could stretch for herself. And she saved until the day she walked through the front door with something no one expected. A car. Her car. Bought entirely on her own. It was green, a lime-like, proud green, and she loved it more than anything she had owned in years. Her old blue car, the one she had driven from San Jose, had died long ago. She had been walking ever since. And not just walking around the neighborhood. Walking to and from Contra Costa College 5 days a week. Both ways. Rain or shine. Cold or heat. Miles and miles. The bus fare back then was only 15 cents, but Cora walked anyway. Maybe she was saving money. Maybe she was clearing her mind. Maybe she was getting exercise. Maybe she was proving something to herself. Or maybe she was simply used to doing hard things the hard way because life had never given her the easy route. But that green car changed everything. No more long walks to campus. No more tired feet. No more rushing home before dark. No more carrying groceries in her arms across half the city. That car was freedom. That car was independence. That car was proof that she could build something for herself, not borrowed, not given, not shared, not dependent on anyone else. It was her victory, her reward, her moment. And every time she turned the key, she felt it, the quiet pride of a woman who had walked miles to earn her future and finally drove herself into it. Holidays at Cora's house, family, food, and pure joy. Holidays at Cora's house became something special, the kind of special people talked about months in advance. Once she settled back into her home and found her rhythm in the kitchen, her cooking became the heartbeat of every celebration. And soon, her own relatives started coming down in bunches, filling the house with laughter, noise, and the kind of warmth only family can bring. They didn't just visit, they rushed in. Suitcases, coats, kids, conversations, all tumbling through the door at once. And Cora loved every second of it. Her culinary gifts had blossomed, and she was blessed with what the family called Cora's farm field love, cooking rooted in Arkansas soil, in her mother's hands, in years of feeding 8 children on a budget and still making it taste good. But the person she cooked for with the most joy, the most heart, the most tenderness, was her sister Jerry. Jerry was her first sister after a string of brothers, and they were close. Sometimes she'd make an extra-large silver bowl of popcorn, and Jerry would literally sit on the big pillow on the floor and eat the entire bowl before she got to the real meal. Cora loved it, and Jerry to the core. Whenever Jerry walked through the door, Cora lit up. She'd start pulling out pots, pans, seasonings, and ingredients like she was preparing a feast for royalty. Jerry didn't have to ask for anything. Cora already knew what she liked, what she craved, what made her smile. The cousins from Fresno, pure joy, pure chaos, pure love. And then came the cousins from Fresno. Their arrival turned the house into a celebration all by itself. The kids would scream, hug, run, laugh, and fall all over each other like they hadn't seen one another in years, even if it had only been a few months. The joy was instant, loud, and contagious. They brought stories from back home. They brought jokes. They brought energy. They brought love. The cousins didn't just visit, they filled the house. They filled the rooms. They filled the air. They filled the holidays with a kind of happiness that made the whole family feel complete. Cora adored seeing them all together, her children, nieces, and nephews bonding, playing, reconnecting, and loving each other with the kind of pure joy only cousins can create. They respected her deeply and always called her Aunt Cora every time they addressed her. Tandy once asked her Aunt Loretta why she and her siblings weren't required to call their aunts with Aunt in front of their names. Before Loretta could answer, Aunt Essie chimed in with a playful, "Oh, please." She explained that Cora was older, and her kids were so close in age to them that it just wasn't a big deal or a requirement in their branch of the family. But Essie herself did require her own children to call her sisters aunt, and hearing her kids say it so properly always sounded adorable to Tandy, one of those small family quirks that stuck in her memory. The smells of the season, Cora's holiday kitchen. And while the house overflowed with laughter, Cora's kitchen overflowed with flavor. The smells drifting through the house were unforgettable. Greens simmering low and slow. Hog head cheese seasoned just right. Turkey seasoned just right. Stuffing made from pure scratch. Shrimp and crab salad that never lasted past the day. Cornbread with crunchy corners. Cake and pies cooling on the counter. Fudge wrapped in wax paper. And whatever new recipe she had mastered that month. Relatives gathered around the table, talking over each other, laughing loud, teasing, telling stories from back home, and bragging about Cora's cooking like she was the best chef in Richmond. And honestly, she was. Someone was always lurking with a camera to snap some memorable moments. The holiday magic, what it really meant. Her kitchen became the center of every holiday. Her food became the glue that held everyone together. Her love, poured into every pot and pan, became the blessing that kept the family close. Holidays at Cora's house weren't just celebrations. They were reunions. They were healing. They were joy. They were tradition. They were family. And every year, as relatives packed into her home, Cora felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. She was surrounded. She was appreciated. She was loved, especially by Jerry, her sister, her heart, her forever friend. The conclusion of Cora's story, a woman who survived, stood, and bloomed. Cora's life was never simple. It was never quiet. It was never easy. She lived through storms that would have broken a weaker woman, carried children through chaos, rebuilt her life more than once, and held her family together with nothing but grit, prayer, and the kind of love that doesn't quit. But the beauty of her story is this. She made it. She truly made it. After years of running from city to city, Richmond, Fresno, Pomona, San Jose, she finally stood still long enough to reclaim her home, her peace, and her future. The courtroom didn't give her the house. Her courage did. Her truth did. Her daughter standing beside her did. And once she had that house back, she never ran again. A new life, built from strength, faith, and love. With the chaos behind her, Cora stepped into a new chapter of her life, one she built with her own hands. She walked miles to Contra Costa College, determined to learn something new. She discovered joy in cooking, joy in creating, joy in feeding people. Her kitchen became legendary, greens simmering, cornbread crisping, shrimp and crab salad disappearing in minutes, sweet and sour chicken devoured before it cooled. She cooked for her children. She cooked for her neighbors. She cooked for her sister Jerry, her heart, her forever friend. She cooked for the cousins from Fresno who filled her home with laughter and pure joy. Her food became her ministry. Her home became her sanctuary. Her life became her testimony. A woman who chose herself and won. Cora didn't just survive her past, she rose above it. She saved every penny of her grant money and bought her own car, proud and independent. She walked into court with her daughter and walked out with her home. She rebuilt her life from the ground up, one meal, one prayer, one decision at a time. She became the woman her children needed. She became the woman she had always hoped to be. She became the woman who proved that strength doesn't have to be loud, it just has to be steady. Her legacy, what she left behind. Cora's story didn't end in fear. It didn't end in running. It didn't end in pain. It ended in victory. It ended in peace. It ended in a home filled with Sunday dinners, holiday laughter, cousins running through the house, Jerry smiling in the kitchen, and children who finally felt safe. Her legacy is simple and powerful. She endured. She protected. She provided. She overcame. She loved. And she left behind a family who remembers her not for the storms she survived, but for the warmth she created afterward. Cora's story is not a tragedy. It is a triumph. A woman who walked through fire and came out whole. A mother who fought for her children and won. A survivor who built a life worth remembering. Cora's journey wasn't defined by what she endured. It was defined by what she overcame. Her legacy is one of resilience, faith, and love, a woman who fought for her family, reclaimed her home, and built a life worth remembering. She didn't just survive her past. She rose above it, leaving behind a story that proves strength doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Cora's chapter ends with peace, with victory, with a home full of warmth, with a family stitched together by her courage, and with the truth that she didn't just make it through, she made it beautiful. I'm Riá Marlowe, and this is the story of Cora, the woman who walked out of Arkansas with endurance in her bones and a quiet strength that carried her family through every storm, a woman shaped by faith, sharpened by hardship, and lifted by a strength she never had to announce. God doesn't always calm the storm, sometimes He strengthens the woman who walks through it. This chapter ends here, but her legacy does not. Remember, real strength isn't loud, it's the kind that survives, rebuilds, and keeps the light on for everyone who follows. Strength isn't always a roar, sometimes it's a woman who simply refuses to fall. This is where her story ends, but the impact she left behind lives on in every child she protected, every home she rebuilt, and every life she touched. Subscribe to the Chronicles and